Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide.
Happy Monday, preschool peeps. I think that those of you who work with infant toddler children, if that fall within the infant toddler years, or even maybe those who don't, are going to be super glad about an episode that has infant toddler in the title. But we're here today to talk particularly about qualifications and credentials, especially keeping in mind that the most rapid brain development happens between birth and age 2. And it occurs to us, the two of us, that for a time of life when the most rapid brain development takes place, there are woefully few credentials and qualifications for people to work with those children.
That's true.
Was that well stated?
That was very well stated and very, very accurate and true. And so sad that that's true. I mean, but it is, right? I mean, there
are a few things for infant toddler staff nationally, and maybe wherever you are. Like, we have the Child Development Associate credential that's administered through the Council for Professional Recognition in Washington, D.C., otherwise known as the CDA credential. And you can get your CDA in a few things. You can get it for working with infants and toddlers. You can get it for working with 3 to 5-year-olds. You can get it as a home visitor. You can get it if you are a family childcare provider. You could potentially get a CDA credential, which requires things like 120 hours of professional development across different subject areas. You have to put together a portfolio, be observed, take an exam. Like, there's a whole bunch of requirements for that.
Right.
Okay. In our state, there either is or has been, I'm not sure the status right now, an infant toddler credential offered through state funding that is its own New Jersey thing where we are, right? Where you could potentially get an infant toddler credential. It occurs to me, though, that the CDA and our state's infant toddler credential are sort of suggested, but not required.
Yes. I was going to say that if we have such things in place, why aren't they being used as part of the job interview process, say? I would think, like, do you have this credential? Do you have this coursework? Are you in the process of getting it? Why is it not being utilized?
Why is it not required? This is the most important brain development stage of life. I mean, it continues. Brain development continues, of course, through pre-K and beyond. Yeah. But birth to 2 is when it is the most rapid.
Right.
And the most, think about the children who've been between birth and 2. The most changes takes place.
Crazy,
and if
amount of changes.
If we're handing our infants and toddlers to people to participate in the caregiving and education of them, because children are learning every waking moment of the day, then shouldn't these people be required to know things about child development and early childhood education? But instead, it's infant toddler rooms. There was a time during which you would get a lot of, for lack of a better word, kind of these very nurturing, caregiving, grandmotherly sorts of people who just love to be around babies and rock them. And, then there was a time period where other demographics came in. But regardless of the time period, it's never been like, you must have this credential.
Right.
Plus, now the public schools are getting involved with early childhood education. Many public schools get federal and or state funding to have classrooms for pre-K. They may have classrooms for 3-year-olds, right? Yes. Those teachers are required, at least where we are, and probably most places, in a public school, to have a standard teaching certificate from your state in the United States. Or, wherever you are, you're required to have this teaching certificate in order to teach in the public schools. To the best of my knowledge, we do not have a teaching certificate that says infants, toddlers, and up. Where we are, it's called P3, right? A P3.
It's a P3,
It's a
preschool through
P3.
grade 3
Preschool,
certification.
starting with P3,
Three,
right? Starting preschool, which implies 3-year-olds,
3-year-olds,
4-year-olds.
4, and then kindergarten up to grade 3.
Don't you think that as we watch pre-K go into the public schools and then 3-year-olds go to the public schools, I know you taught 2-year-olds in a public school.
In a public school. That's how I got my public school career started, was doing 2-year-olds.
Don't you think that eventually we will see infant toddler care within our public school systems and funding?
Yes, I do think that. I think that's the trend, right? It started with kindergarten used to not be required, remember? And then now it is. Well, it still isn't in our state, but like if you moved into somewhere that they're like, yeah, we don't offer kindergarten, you'd be like, what are you nuts? You know?
Yeah.
And that's soon becoming like that with pre-K. You're going to move into an area and they're going to say, do you have pre-K in your district? And I think eventually it's going to say, do you have 2-year-olds?
Absolutely.
And then once 2-year-olds are there, they're going to say, do you have infant care?
Yeah.
You know, I think that's what it's going to be. It's just going to trend downward to the younger ages. I
think for 2 reasons.
Yeah.
I think because to pay for it privately is very expensive.
Yeah.
And people struggle to afford it. I think
Yes.
it's also because there's a national recognition and an international recognition that the early childhood years are some of the most important years for learning and development and set a foundation for all that's going to come in the future. I think once public school systems, publicly funded school systems figure it out, they will include that. Just like Head Start started in the United States with 3 and 4-year-olds, we now have early Head Start for infants and toddlers.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think you'll end up with some sort of equivalent in the public schools to early Head Start. Problem with this is that I don't know of any certification that is as universally known as something like an elementary school certification, a P3 certification, a high school certification. Like, are the each state determines its own educational system. So this can't be determined by the federal government.
Right.
Are the states working on trying to figure out how do we offer a teaching credential for infants and toddlers? And are the school systems thinking about, well, someday, I'm sure they're thinking someday we may offer this, but if they're thinking about the fact that finding credentialed staff is going to be hard, especially if the certifications don't cover that.
Right. I think it's going to be, say they are trending to go down that pathway, right? Where they're like, we want in our public schools, like maybe individual states will start it that way and say, we want infant toddlers. They're going to have to, I think, approach people who are maybe already in the field doing infant toddlers and say, we'll give you a scholarship.
That's what happened in New Jersey with the Abbott districts back in the day. We used to have there was a ruling called the Abbott ruling, and it brought in early childhood programs to the most at-risk areas in the state.
And they still exist, those Abbott schools.
Abbott was abolished. They're now called something else.
Because I was just
Abbott was abolished.
Is in, well, nobody's going to know where this is, but in our state, and it's still listed as an Abbott school.
It doesn't count as
Then
any.
their website is really
Their website is out of date. The Abbott system was abolished when UPK came in, or maybe even before.
Yeah.
But so at any rate, what I was saying about the Abbott system was they decided there was this ruling where in the most at-risk areas, you could bring pre-K into your public school system so that children would get the opportunity in these areas to attend a pre-K program that had any kind of quality. And the teachers were not certified. And so there was money put aside through grants where they paid for teachers to go get bachelor's degrees and go get state certification. I think you're right. I think that there would have to be consideration of doing this, so that today the cost for that, I mean, Abbott started a long time ago. The cost for that is tremendous.
Or is it going to be like somebody like me who's already in it, already has her P3, just go get another endorsement?
Maybe.
Which would be cheaper all around.
I would have to get another endorsement.
Just get another endorsement. But then somebody like that's already in it would have to say, yes, I do want to teach that age level. And I'm not sure how that would go, but like would it just be another endorsement you could add on to your already earned teaching certificate?
But see, here's how I see the problem. You and I are right now talking about the future and the potential for the
Yes.
future.
But it should
Right,
be now.
right now we're
What about now?
we're sitting in a landscape where it's very hard to hire in early childhood programs. And right now, our infants and toddlers are not in the public school system here anyway. Maybe they are where you are, but they're not here.
Yeah.
And so they are housed solely in private and corporate childcare programs.
Yeah.
Where these requirements don't exist, where it's very hard to get staff, and you have to get more staff for an infant and toddler space than you would for pre-K.
Yes.
So you have to hire more people. They struggle to find qualified people. You need a certain number of adults to children, and people are just being hired without any kind of experience or credential, which, it's part of today's landscape that they can't find people. People need to go to work. They need the childcare.
Yeah.
We have to find people to staff these classrooms. I think part of staffing the rooms should be, and we're going to educate you. You are going to need to go get, at the very least, your CDA credential or any credential your state offers for infant toddler care. To consistently just have people with no training in child development bothers me.
It should bother you. I just don't know what the solution is. Because if you're saying in order to hire someone for an infant toddler room, that they are now required to go get their CDA, and the person is willing to take the job but does not want to do the coursework,
then go
Now
work somewhere else.
go work somewhere
Go
else.
work
But
somewhere
now
else.
that school has no one.
It's
So they're going to take, I think they're just taking, it's a workforce.
it's a
issue.
workforce systems,
Yeah.
early childhood education, larger than you and me in this
Yes,
podcast.
yes,
But you know what? If we don't bring it out into the white hot spotlight,
correct.
then
That's what we're here for.
somebody start talking about this.
Talk about this stuff.
This is, and the people who I'm sure that the people who are working with the infants and toddlers are very well-meaning people. You need to know something about how children develop and learn in order to provide them with the highest quality of actions and interactions and opportunities to expand what they can already do in a way that's going to lay a foundation for the future. And I think that we really, as a society, need to think about, yes, we've acknowledged internationally that pre-K and even the three-year-old classes are super important and need to be available to everybody. But folks, all learning starts at birth.
Yeah.
When I provide professional development, I often say to people, it isn't the threes class, isn't when we start teaching.
Right.
We start teaching from the time a child is born, if not before.
Before.
So-
And I'll say before, like my degree is in child development, but it's in birth through age 5 education.
But is that your certification to teach?
But no, because
No.
it's not. But maybe if you have that kind of program, this birth through age 5, why isn't the certification birth through age 5 as a separate endorsement? I don't know.
I'm thinking about the textbooks that I've used as a college instructor.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said it that way. College instructor. And I'm thinking about the courses I have facilitated, and they are not aimed at infants and toddlers.
See, but my program I learned about like prenatal like stuff, like how
I think that's not the norm. Maybe.
it's not. I don't think it is. I think I was in some sort of rare program, which was wonderful.
Yeah.
Where I went to college. It was absolutely great. I got a really good education, very well rounded, but that's not the norm everywhere else. Everywhere else, it's like you got an early ed degree. It starts at age 3, I think.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also reminded of, so I have teaching certification through high school. I have endorsed,
Yeah.
right? So I'm thinking of, when I did mandated student teaching, it was like, okay, we're going to certify you like K to 12 in this subject area. You're going to spend 10 minutes in elementary school, and then you're going to do all your student teaching with older children.
Yes.
And I'm afraid that's going to happen. It's going to be like, you're going to spend 10 minutes on the infant thing, and then we're going to send you to pre-K.
Right. But I think, at least in the States, the student teaching has become a little bit more, I don't know,
Well,
stricter.
it is. It's more
right?
structured and stricter than what back in the
It's a
day.
longer period of
Yeah.
time, because I think they're acknowledging, like, okay, great, she did student teaching in pre-K, but her certification goes up to grade 3. So I think they're trying to get the students in to at least maybe
Yeah, you're probably
every
right.
grade level for a certain amount of time. Because it's a 2-year thing now in this state, not just or it's not, it used to just be 1 semester.
I
Now,
was
think
a-
it's 2 years.
I was a one semester
And
girl, and look at me today. Look at me today.
Look at me.
Well, so much of learning about teaching has to do not only with education, but also experience. But I think you need both. I think it's just not enough to say, well, I've worked with infants for 15, 20 years. Can you imagine, there's something you need to go maybe to a doctor, and you go in and you don't see any medical degrees hanging up. So you say to the doctor, you say to your doctor, like, what is your educational background? And the doctor says, well, I've been seeing patients for 20 years. And you say, okay, but where's your medical certification? And they say, no, I've been seeing patients for 20 years.
Seeing them where? On the train? You just happen to be in the same room with them?
Don't you think
Yes,
it's sort of an
I get like
equivalent?
that,
It
yes.
has an impact on you and on the future, and early
Yes.
education has an impact on your children and on the future.
Mhm.
And when we say, I often think that when people say, but I have X number of years of experience, or this person has X number of years, I'm thinking, well, that's nice, but I also wouldn't go to a dentist who just has experience, but no education. So if we're going to talk about early childhood education as a profession and professionalizing it,
Yes.
then we have to embrace the fact that the education matters,
Yes.
and that we actually as teachers do better the more we're educated. That's why we are required to do professional development every year to continue to be educated. But you can't, even that, like, yeah, you can go to professional development sessions, but I'm sorry, it's not the same as it's not the same. It's not even the same as studying for the CDA credential.
No.
You are required, as I said, for the CDA credential to do 120 hours of professional development across different subject areas. But you also have to put together a portfolio, take an exam, be observed.
Mhm.
So that at least there's this process by which you are proving your competency.
Right.
That's the point of the CDA. It's a competency-based credential. You are proving you are competent, but you also have to be educated.
Right.
They won't do it without that 120 hours.
Right.
It's not the equivalent. If people are listening to this and they're thinking, oh, I'll just do that instead of getting a degree. It's not the equivalent. You still can't work in the public school as a teacher with a CDA.
Yeah, that's true. If you have a CDA, you're typically hired as an aide.
Right. Where we are. I mean,
we are. Yeah.
I don't want to speak for every state
Yeah.
because every state governs their own system,
Yeah.
but I would imagine that that's pretty common.
Yeah.
And if you're a parent listening to this, I really encourage you at this juncture of early education, at this time, if you're going to be looking at private programs for your infant, toddler, even 2-year-old, I encourage you to go in and say, do the teachers have any credentials like the CDA credential? Ask about that.
Ask them.
You may be surprised how many places tell you either no or they're working on it.
Right.
For when people say to me, we're working on it, for me,
means-
that's like it's not an accomplished thing. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't put much stock in that.
The process of working on it, they are, right?
Again, if my dentist said I'm working on it, I'd be like, oh, I got to go see another dentist.
See ya.
Yeah. So yeah. I think it's a valuable question. If your state has any kind of infant, toddler, or 2-year-old credential, it's a valuable question to go into the program and say, do the teachers working in these rooms have the state or CDA credential? And if not, that's your choice then.
Yeah.
But I would be like
But,
looking
yeah.
for the one I think that
Yeah.
does, because it
Yeah.
shows that they have done some studying and education about brain and child development.
Yeah.
It's such an important time. I want you all to think about this. And it's an example I often give. If I put you in a room with a 4-month-old and an 8-month-old, and I said to you, show me the 4-month-old, you could, because there's such a developmental difference between a 4-month-old and an 8-month-old. If I put you in a room with a 4-year-old and a 4.5-year-old, and I said, show me the 4-year-old, you'd be guessing.
Yeah.
Because the development is not as rapid, and there's a less of a difference between a 4-year-old and a 4.5-year-old than there is between a 4-month-old and an 8-month-old. And if we look at that difference between the 4-month-old and the 8-month-old, you will see how much development and how many teaching opportunities there are. People who are working with children of that age need to know things like attachment theory. What do we know about the value of attachments in these very young years? And how do we develop those attachments? There's education about that. You know, what do we know about even like the culture, people's cultures and family context, and how that impacts the understandings, the behaviors, the knowledge of infants and toddlers. There's just so much information out there that's missed when we're in an environment that just doesn't seem to value the education of people who work with these extremely young children. I think if it was valued, we would see it. It would be more apparent.
There would be more changes taking place. And there isn't right now. I mean, I don't think there is, at least.
I don't know, but I want to give a shout out to all those programs, schools, and people who do pursue the infant toddler CDA credential, either individually or for their staff. I want to commend you because it is not required, but it's something that shows that hopefully the children will benefit from the fact that the adults valued getting this education and this credential. And I don't care what anybody says, education matters, earning credentials matter, and you can see the difference. I know I can. When I walk into a classroom where people are earning or have earned credentials, and I walk into a classroom where they have not, the difference is apparent, folks. So again, I commend all of you who have done it, and including those of you who have maybe earned a CDA, the preschool, family childcare, home visitor CDA, whatever you've done to get that education, hats off to you. Because again, it's often not required. Maybe it was required of your program, but that means you found a program that really does value, hopefully, doing things for children. I mean, there are times when people will say to me, but my program will let me do that, which is a topic for a whole other day. If the credentials say to do this, you all should be doing this. But anyway, I hope you'll all go with some food for thought from this episode and think about what is it that the most rapid brain development time of life does not require people to have credentials.
It boggles your mind.
It is really mind-boggling.
Right,
just saying. Okay, preschool peeps, if you actually work in a place where that is required, or your certification is birth to 3 or birth to, starts at birth. Please contact us and let us know where you are. Go to our website, howpreschoolteachersdoit.com, and send us that information in a contact form, or send us a message on Facebook, because we would like to get a sense of where this is taking place versus where this is not. So please do that. And if you download the Spaces by Wix app, you can contact us directly there as well, and you can get instructions for that on our website. Okay, preschool peeps, we will catch you next Monday.